What it was like. Inside a castle under siege. You hear the warning horn before you see the army. People run toward the gates. Carts crowd the entrance. Livestock are driven through the mud. Guards shout from the walls as the last families struggle inside. Then the drawbridge rises. The portcullis falls. By nightfall, the castle built to protect you has become the only place you cannot leave. Outside, thousands of men prepare to break the walls. Inside, soldiers, servants, and civilians begin counting the food. This is not the story of how an army attacked a medieval castle. It is the story of what happened to the people trapped behind its walls. The waiting, the hunger, the disease, the rumors of rescue, and the moment when the stone finally failed. Section 1. The gates close. A castle needed warning. Scouts, messengers, or smoke on the horizon might provide enough time to prepare. Grain was carried into storerooms, barrels were filled, arrows, crossbow bolts, timber and stones were gathered. If there was enough warning, some non-combatants might be sent away. Others rushed toward the fortress because the countryside outside offered no protection at all. Every person admitted through the gate became another life to defend. They also became another mouth to feed. The steward counted the grain. The commander inspected the walls. Carpenters reinforced the gates while masons searched for cracks. Wells and cisterns were checked. Animals were crowded into courtyards. Anything outside the walls that might help the enemy could be burned or destroyed. Then the gates closed. From that moment, survival depended on what had been brought inside. Section 2. The first week. At first, life remained organized. Guards rotated along the battlements. Cooks prepared meals. Servants carried water. Masons watched the walls while carpenters strengthened doors and barricades. Beyond the ramparts, the enemy built an entire town of tents, kitchens, workshops, and animal pens. The defenders could see fires spreading across the fields each night. They could hear axes cutting timber for siege engines. They watched roads disappear beneath enemy patrols. Sometimes nothing happened for days. That silence was its own weapon. The attackers wanted the people inside to watch, imagine, and lose sleep. Every unfamiliar sound might mean ladders against the wall. Every shout might mean a gate had been betrayed. During the first week, the castle still felt strong. The people inside did not yet know how long they would need it to remain strong. Section 3. Supplies begin to fail. Rations often shrank before hunger truly arrived. Fresh food disappeared first. Milk soured, fruit spoiled, meat had to be salted or eaten quickly. Grain became the heart of survival. It could be ground into flour, boiled into porridge, or stretched into smaller loaves. Cheese, dried fish, and salted meat might last longer, but every barrel eventually emptied. Animals created another problem. Horses required fodder and water, but they were also needed for messages, raids, and escape. No commander wanted to slaughter valuable war horses too soon. No starving garrison could feed them forever. Vermin found the storerooms. Damp ruined grain. Careless rationing wasted supplies that could not be replaced. Every meal became political. Soldiers guarding the walls expected enough food to fight. Laborers repairing damage believed their work was just as important. Noble households might expect privilege, and civilians watched every unequal portion. Hunger did more than weaken bodies. It tested the entire order of the castle. Section 4. Water decides the siege. Food could sometimes be stretched. Water could not. Many castles had wells or cisterns that collected rainwater. Others depended on springs, streams, or supplies that could be threatened from outside the walls. Buckets rose from the well throughout the day. Water was needed for drinking, cooking, animals, cleaning wounds, and extinguishing fires. As the siege continued, those demands increased. Crowding made everything worse. Latrines filled. Waste accumulated. Washing became less frequent. A contaminated well or broken cistern could turn a strong fortress into a trap. Medieval people did not understand disease through germ theory, but they understood that foul water and crowded rooms brought sickness. Fever spread. Stomachs failed. Weak defenders left the walls and did not return. A fortress could survive broken stone. It could not survive without drinkable water. Section 5. The walls come under attack. Then the bombardment began. The first stone might strike a tower and leave little more than a scar. The next might tear through a roof. Repeated impacts shook dust from ceilings and sent fragments across the courtyard. The destruction was not always immediate. That made it worse. Each blow forced the defenders to wonder which section would fail first. Masons studied the cracks. At night, they packed damaged walls with timber, rubble, and earth. Carpenters built new barriers behind weak points. Soldiers gathered stones and missiles for the next assault. Below the ground, another battle might be approaching. Enemy miners dug toward the foundations. Their goal was to hollow out the earth beneath a tower or wall, support it with timber, and burn the supports. The defenders answered with countermines. Men dug into darkness, hoping to intercept the attackers before the wall collapsed. The fortress was no longer simply a building. It was a wounded body being kept alive. Section 6. Rumors and fear spread. No one behind the walls knew exactly what was happening beyond the enemy lines. Had a relief army been raised? Had the messenger escaped? Was the Lord coming back? Had nearby allies changed sides? A distant light could become a rescue signal. A rider on the horizon could become an army. By evening, the same story might be dismissed as a lie. The attackers understood this uncertainty. They offered surrender terms. They displayed prisoners. They shouted promises and threats toward the walls. They wanted civilians to pressure the commander and soldiers to doubt their officers. Some people wanted to fight to the end. Others wanted the gates opened before the final assault. This was not simply courage against cowardice. It was arithmetic. How many days of grain remained? How many defenders were still healthy? How much chance was there that relief would arrive? A siege forced leaders to measure reputation against human lives. Section 7. The breach opens. Then one morning the wall no longer held. A cracked section collapsed beneath bombardment or mining. Dust filled the courtyard. The alarm spread through the castle. The breach was rarely an open invitation. Defenders rushed forward with spears, bows, and crossbows. Carts, beams, and rubble formed an inner barricade. Every available fighter was needed. Servants carried ammunition. Laborers dragged stones. Wounded men returned to the line because there was nowhere else to go. Families moved toward the strongest remaining buildings. Doors were barred. Fires were smothered before sparks could spread through roofs and storerooms. At the breach, the enemy had to climb over broken stone beneath arrows and falling debris. The space was narrow, confused, and violent. The first assault might be repelled. Cheers would rise from the walls. Then the defenders would look outside and see the enemy forming again. They had survived the assault. They had not survived the siege. Section 8. The final choice. Once a breach existed, the commander faced the final decision. He could negotiate. He could attempt a breakout. He could remain behind the damaged walls and wait for the next attack. Surrender before the fortress was stormed might preserve lives. The garrison could sometimes leave under agreed terms. Officers might retain their freedom, weapons, or property. If the attackers entered by force, mercy became far less certain. Yet the besieging army was also under pressure. Soldiers outside needed food, wages, and shelter. Disease moved through camps. Rain destroyed roads. Reinforcements could arrive for either side. A siege was never a simple contest between strong attackers and helpless defenders. Both sides were waiting for the other to break. If the final assault came, the castle fell one enclosure at a time. The outer wall, the courtyard, the gatehouse, The keep. Each retreat made the surviving space smaller. Stone could provide another hour. It could not create food, water, or healthy soldiers. Eventually, a banner came down. A gate opened. The siege was over. Conclusion: a medieval castle offered protection, but protection had a price. The same walls that kept an army outside trapped hunger, disease, and fear within. Every extra defender strengthened the garrison, but every extra person consumed the supplies, keeping it alive. Castles did not make people invincible. They gave them time. Time for an ally to arrive, time for the enemy to run out of food, time to negotiate, time to endure one more assault. For the attacker's side of this story, continue with our documentary Medieval Warfare, The Art of the Siege. If you enjoy documentaries about medieval warfare, castles, and life in the Middle Ages, like this video and subscribe to TorchLit History. Castles did not survive because stone was fearless. They survived because people endured until endurance ran out. Behind every ruined wall is the same truth. A fortress can delay history, but it cannot escape it.